Thank you for joining us today. My name is Leila Dehghan. I'm a nutritionist and the founder of Plant-Based Health Justice. Today, we have an amazing panel on 1 year in reflections on the ongoing genocide, and we'll be discussing everything about justice, but our focuses are obviously on Gaza and Palestinians. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to highlight two fundraisings. I know there are a lot of fundraisings going on at the moment, but I chose these two because Vegan in Gaza is a group of volunteers who are actually on the ground, and they just buy vegetables, oil, and they distribute them to families who need food. And Plant the Land team, Anas, is on the ground. He is buying food, blankets, whatever is necessary, the essentials. And I believe, these two fundraisers, what is happening on the ground is actually helping people to survive, to stay alive. I know not everybody is in the position to donate, but we can always share, and then maybe we can reach somebody who is able to donate. So I would really appreciate it if you could scan the codes and, share with your network. 11 months ago, exactly 11 months ago, actually, I interviewed Laura. That was after the genocide had just started. And to be honest, if somebody would have told me that I would be here discussing the same thing again, I would have never believed it. And it's really painful to be here, to be discussing this. After 11 months, it's a year. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels heartbroken. What we have seen and witnessed, it is a lot to take in, and that's why we are here. We want to see how we can move forward, to reflect on what has been happening and what we can do as individuals. Anas, he actually had an idea. He told me that he would have liked to speak about providing tents to people in Gaza, because what he was telling me is that people actually in Gaza, some have sold their tents so that they could buy food. Some have sold whatever items they had at home, just, to be able to buy food. And now with winter coming, it's going to be cold. A lot of people are sleeping on the streets. And his idea was just give them a roof over their heads. He was hoping that we could actually use this event today to raise funds for that. So that is something to bear in mind. And when you are sharing the link to Plant the Land team PayPal. So I'm going to keep it short. I'll just briefly introduce our amazing panelist, Laura. She's a Jewish American and the co-founder of Plant the Land team. She's a vegan activist who toured the Middle East performing in a circus troupe for Palestinian Iraqi refugee children. She has taught courses on the history of Palestine for Wesleyan University's Green Street Art Center. She also serves as conference director for the Institute for Critical Animal Studies and program chair at Promoting Enduring Peace. She writes for various publications on issues relating to human, animal, and ecological liberation. And then Waseem, he is a Palestinian vegan and food blogger, and he educates others about the connection between Arab cuisine and veganism, highlighting how cultural appropriation contributes to the oppression of living beings. Akbar is a collective liberation activist with experience in both animal and human rights movements. His advocacy began during the anti-war efforts in Afghanistan and Iraq and has since expanded to include reproductive justice, immigration, environmentalism, LGBTQ rights, and economic equality. He currently serves as Director of Communications and Public Engagement for Apex Advocacy. Anas, he is the co-founder of Plant the Land, which is a Gaza-based vegan food justice and community project. And as I mentioned earlier, he is on the ground in Gaza. We would actually start with him so that he can tell us about the situation. Hi, Anas. Thank you for joining us. It's really nice seeing you.
I'm happy to be there and happy to join. It is hard to provide internet and electricity. Today, Israel bombed the contact point in Gaza. That's make the situation here too hard to have the internet. But thank God I have the internet right now.
Good. I'm really glad that you made it. We exchanged a few messages earlier, and I was asking you to tell us about how people are surviving in Gaza. We keep hearing that there isn't any food and that there isn't any aid actually getting into Gaza. So where do people get actually food from?
It's hard to explain about how the people can have the food or how they can have the necessary food or what they want. But to be honest, most of them right now try to sign an organization and try to talk with the volunteers like me and like my team, asking about help about what we can do doing for them. Most of people right now not have enough of money to buy what they want and what they need. For example, something last week going visited some markets. They were selling vegetables and chocolate. It's hard me because children been with me and my daughter told me, "Oh, Dad, it is banana." Since 1 year right now, we not able to buy or to eat the vegetables or the fruits. And since 8 or 10 months, we are not find the vegetables or the food in North Gaza. So it is hard to provide food, but we are try to do the best. The land team are working in Gaza and try to help everyone in North Gaza. Everything here expensive, but through kind people and through donation from kind people, we are able to help and to buy anything we find. Like last week, we provided hot meals, rice to more than 200 families. Each family have 2 meals. It is like lunch for them, and you need to know that rice very hard to buy it because it is expensive. The family hard to buy what they want, but through people like my team and through people who donate to provide the assistance for families, we are able to help the families in Gaza.
Thank you. I want to ask you a question because we hear that no aid is getting in. So where does that food come from? I know it is expensive, but where does it come from? You mentioned that some people have started, growing their own vegetables, but that food, what is available on the market, where does it come from?
I need to let you know that food come through Israel points. Some type of vegetables, people here plant it. You need to know that some people have the packages from the World Food Program, from Oxfam, from Norway, and they not save it to eat. That's the big problem. They sold it and selling it for people in the high price. So when people have the packages, they selling it, and the organization not cover all families, and they are not able to cover all families. So we talk about my team. When we see people selling the items and selling the package, we buy it and provide it to needy families in North Gaza. Not all types of food available here. We just talk about cans, like cans of peas, like rice, tomato paste, spaghetti, like that. About vegetables, I told you that some people plant it, and some people, when they come from the south and coming, I mean about trucks, they bought some box with the driver to give it here to people selling it with high cost. So we talk about 1 kilo of tomato right now, it is cost $100. So how the one family can buy it is hard. And you know that since 1 year, no income for all people in Gaza. We are, and I'm talking especially about my team, because really, I'm sorry to say that, I'm not believe of any organization, but a red line under organization, because we have a problem with organization here, because we find that organization here is helping people who have relation with them, and that's not good, especially in this time and in this situation. It's hard for everyone, and everyone need help. Also me, I need help. I'm not able to have my insulin. I lost my right eye because I'm not have medicine. Also, I'm not have a good food, and that's make a bigger problem for my health. So, organization should help everyone, and they should do the best for people. I remember last 3 or 4 months, visited one family. because they talked with me, and this family said that they not have a baby milk, bumpers, and clean water. They talked with me in the middle of night, and they said that we are sorry for bother you and us, but really the baby not have milk or bumpers, and we not have clean water. So I'm visiting them, and in the risky and dangerous situation in the night, especially in the night, Israel always bombed everyone walk in the night. Someone have a small market, and I told him I need to buy bumpers, water, and anything for this family. And thank God we visited this family and provide everything they want. And I told them that tomorrow I will provide the 3 cans of milk. And thank God they have 3 cans of milk. And until now, each week we provided milk for them.
Thank you. You said something which it's interesting that has really preoccupied my thoughts. You said that a lot of these aid organizations, they favor the people they know, and they shouldn't, because they should treat everybody equally. And one thing I sometimes, when I look at Instagram, the different accounts we see from the ground in Gaza, I always believe, we talk about people having resources, but we don't have access to the same resources. I can't help thinking of those Palestinians in Gaza whose voices and stories are not being heard because maybe they don't speak English, they don't have access to a mobile phone, they don't, we say they are not numbers, but still those people, even among marginalized people, there are people who are more marginalized, more discriminated against. And I always think there are so many who are suffering right now, who may lose their lives, and we will never hear about them. Yeah, and what you just told me, I think it's sad. It's sad that even in a situation like this, where a genocide is happening, everybody's life is at risk. So it's not just like, when a bomb falls, it's not going to say, oh no, I'm not going to kill you, I'm going to just kill that other family. Those attacks, these Israeli attacks, is treating everybody equally. But among, the people, that is not the situation. Some people are just, they are in a better position. Thank you. Last question before I move on, because, we all know, I hope that everybody knows by now, that it didn't start on October 7th. But I do believe that October 7th was different. I still remember how my sister came and asked me, have you heard what happened? And then she told me about the attacks by Hamas. And we looked at each other and said, oh my God, that is bad. This is going to be very bad. And I know you know Dr. Ghassan Abu Sita, who is a UK-based plastic surgeon, and he left for Gaza shortly after October 7th because he knew his people would need his skills. And, Israel had been bombing and killing Palestinians in Gaza every year. In fact, every few months there has been bombing. So you could say, yes, it wasn't anything new, but this felt a little bit different. So I want to know, when people in Gaza heard about the attacks by Hamas, that Hamas had attacked Israel, how did they feel about it? Did they kind of feel that this is going to be different, or was it just, okay, Israel is going to retaliate? What were people thinking?
First of all, I realize I'm not very good with the Zoom. I'm see now that Laura here and Akbar and many friends here. So hello everyone. I'm really proud that I'm seeing you all. Really thank you for inviting me, Leila, to have a good friends and a good supporter for Palestine. It's first time to see Waseem. I'm happy to see you, my dear brother. Really. So about the 7th of October, everyone know that Israel killed people, arrest children, and killed children in West Bank and Gaza. We are under the siege since 16 or 17 years. And like I said before, we need to be free, like all countries. It's our right to be free. About the attack from Hamas to Israel, Hamas not attacked Israel, by the way. Israel always starting the war and always starting killing of people here. We should say that Hamas defend about Gaza and defend the people in Gaza. It is the right for residents to be free, for people to be free. Why we talk about this is a war crime for Hamas and not for crime for Israel for what they did before. Why the world silent and not say anything to Israel about what will happen after the 7th of October? Yes, we expected it. And we know that Israel will attack more this time. We expected their response to be guilty different, but everyone knows that Israel has always waged wars and killed many without any reason. Just to remind you of the aggression launched by Israel in 2014, and Israel attacked Gaza for 2 months, 54 days. They attacked Gaza and they bombed Gaza and they did like what they are doing now. Why this? Because they want to kill everyone in Gaza. Because they think that we don't have the right to be alive. So we expected that Israel will doing more and more for what happened in the 7th of October. Israel is the one who started this war. How can we live under siege and not do anything? Many questions we have to the world. Why they are silent? Now Israel attacking the Lebanon. Why the world not say anything for crimes for Israel? Why they think that Israel the baby and they should always care about them and not care about the lives of Palestine or any Arab. They killed my sister-in-law without any reason. I told Laura that Israel army talked with me and they said that I should stop the humanity. I asked him why. He told me that they have the power and they control. I told him I'm not afraid, I'm not worried. I will doing the best of the families here. He told me that we will destroy your life, your home, your children, your wife. I told him, sorry, that will not stop me. I will keep working. And after a week, yes, they destroyed my home. They destroyed the hospital that I stay in. They also killed some of my closer friends. Sorry, remember some friends really, and remember my sister-in-law. That's hurt me because they killed her without any reason. She was a good girl and she is doing the best for her family. They killed her and now my wife family in the south and I cannot see them or doing anything for them. I'm just able to call them and just say, how are you? After that, we cry and it's hard too much, especially for my wife. She lost a sister. By the way, after they destroying my home, the army talked with me again and they told me that we destroyed your home and you should stop your humanity of work. I told them I cannot because it is my duty for my people here. When I see the families are happy, that's make me happy to complete the work. I'm not afraid from Israel army. Maybe they can killing me now. They can attack the place that I stay in right now. So I'm not scared and I'm not afraid. Palestinian people not afraid of anything. Let everyone know that we have the right to defend ourselves and we have the right to life like everyone. Even, for example, now you have electricity, you have water, you have food, you have everything. Why I'm not have all of this? You are a human and I'm also human. The world should wake up and should stand with the right people and with the right side. I'm not have any problem with any Jewish, with any Israeli also. I'm not have any problem with anyone. But when you stole my land, I will stop you and I will fight you. We have the right to defend. We have the right to be free. And what happened in the 7th October, I think it is a way to be free.
Thank you, Anas. I really appreciate you taking the time to share all these stories with us. I'm really sorry for the loss of your sister-in-law and also many friends. Just seeing how other people are suffering, it is heartbreaking. I really appreciate it. I hope you can continue staying, on the call, and maybe later we can ask you a few more questions. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Many activists and politicians over the years have referred to Palestine as the litmus test for morality. And I wonder, after a year of televised genocide, this has been almost like a live streamed genocide. We get live footage of what is happening, of the bombings and massacres. Despite our protest marches, boycotts, emailing our representatives, nothing has changed. In fact, now Israel is also bombing Lebanon. And I'm just wondering, what does this say about the state of morality in our world? Laura, do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yes. When I looked at the question that you emailed in advance, I saw that phrase, what is the state of morality in this world? And then my brain kind of flipped it around and saw, what is the morality of states in this world? Because, if you look at the world's people, actually, there's been a massive outcry, I think, in the past year. We've seen protest after protest. We've seen people taking really big risks, even to their own safety. Certainly the campus movement is a huge example of that. We've seen extreme brutality from the authorities of the state to crush these populist mass resistance. In the past I would have said, what is the state of morality of the world as in the world's people? But if you look at the world's people, the vast majority of people are really horrified by what Israel is doing to Gaza. The people in power, the rich, the ruling class, the Zionists, they don't represent world opinion. I don't think they ever represented world opinion, first of all, because we never really think about world opinion a lot of times in, the industrialized capitalist societies. We don't think about the real enormity of world opinion, mostly is colonized people, right? That's the global majority. And so I would say that the world's people have always really stood, in solidarity with Palestine to the extent that they could, at least in their hearts, if not, in their ability to take action on it. But at this stage, it isn't even just the colonized world or the global south. It is, or the peripheral, right? It's the imperial core nations, even the people there, the masses of people, certainly marginalized people within those populations, and even some of the people that are more on the, privileged end of the spectrum, but not ruling class, are coming out and speaking out against this in a lot of cases. And of course, many Jewish people even are coming out and speaking out against this in the diaspora. So, I don't think that the states of the nation, the states of the world represent the state of the world in terms of its morality. But, when you look at the states' morality, they have, what Nietzsche called the master morality, right? Might makes right. They have the morality of dominators, of conquerors. They have the morality of, we are thinking about what is going to advance our capitalist, imperialist, colonialist agenda. And so, of course, when you look at the states of the world, in many cases, especially, with the imperial nations, they support Israel, they back Israel. And I always want to emphasize that when I say support Israel, I don't just mean in their hearts. I mean, they financially, materially, and militarily support Israel. So you have this widening, I would say, gap between how the world's people feel about what is happening and the injustices and the oppression, and in this case, outright genocide that's happening, versus what the states feel, what the ruling class, the corporate ruling class, the oligarchs, the people in government, all of those people that are in positions of power. You've got the media, the corporate controlled media, obviously got the military industrial complex. So all of these things, they don't represent the morality of the people. And that's why, in my activism, I'm always kind of really trying to center this issue of direct democracy, or even what's called sociocracy. But this idea of the people should be having the decision-making power. These decisions should not be made by a ruling class above us. We should be the ones making these decisions, because, we're out there, a lot of us are out there doing protests and boycotting and camping out, and, all of these things, but we don't have ultimately the decision-making power. And that's really the crux of the issue.
Thank you. I like how you rephrased the question. I have a friend in the West Bank. She's a vegan Palestinian, and I have been emailing her, and I keep saying, if it was up to the people, Palestine would be free this very minute. And you just actually touched on that exactly. The people are on the right side, let's call it, of history. So the people do want a free Palestine, do want an end to oppression. It is those with power, the states really. Now I want to take this quote, Palestine is the litmus test for morality, and look at our vegan community, because let's be honest, 90% of the vegan community has remained silent. And I wonder, what does that say about the morality within our community? Akbar, maybe you want to talk about it, because vegans usually pride themselves on being compassionate, and they happily say they are preachy and, they are loud, but they have been quiet. So, Akbar, what does that say about vegans, the vegan community? Animal rights community.
So, I wrote out my answer to this. I tend to be a little long-winded, so forgive me if I go on a little bit. Please cut me off if I'm talking too long. But, so when we talk about the quote vegan community, I'm assuming that we mean actually the mainstream vegan and animal advocacy organizations and individuals which have largely been silent on the genocide. I personally no longer consider myself a member of that space because of this very reason, but as someone who once found himself in its ranks, I will say of the moral state of the movement what I said in the official statement by Apex Advocacy on the movement's silence on the genocide in Palestine, which was, like, quote, many progressive and, quote, liberal spaces, the mainstream animal rights movement has co-opted the language, the frameworks, and the ideologies of the right. And by the right, I mean the ideology which says that whiteness is the standard to which we should all aspire. The mainstream animal rights movement in the global north is a fully white supremacist, colonial, capitalist, patriarchal, and pro-genocide space, which has shown us for nearly an entire year now that it is perfectly fine with the most horrific forms of violence being inflicted upon the most marginalized of the marginalized. It has demonstrated for a year now that its, quote, compassion is selective and self-serving, and that it has nothing to do with creating a kinder world, but serving the needs and desires of the master donor class, and that is actively invested in the annihilation of the Palestinians. The movement has traded in its values of unconditional and universal compassion for the promise of revenue, and in doing so has become complicit in genocide. It has become a part of the apparatus of death, and like every part of that apparatus of moral rot, it will decay and wither and die. And it is doing so right now. And so to the movement, I can only say that you are officially irrelevant to any and all questions of justice and liberation. Your fatal wounds are self-inflicted, and what's more, you are now an active and willing member of the oppression of beyond humans, of animals, and all who are animalized by the system to which you have pledged your allegiance. Now, the good news is, and that's a very cynical take, I know, but the good news is that there is a new movement that has been birthed and which is being created right now. With every passing day, more and more activists with functioning hearts and consciences who actually live their professed values are questioning their place in a space that looks the other way from blatant evil and are ready to lend their compassion, their care, and their collective righteous rage to the movement for total liberation. The moral stature of animal liberation as an advocacy movement is transitioning as awareness has settled in that the mainstream movement does not actually believe in universal compassion or upholding the most marginalized, but instead simply wields these ideals as branding and marketing tools. The veil has been lifted, and we can see the movement for the grotesque caricature of social justice into which it has currently devolved. It took literal live-streamed open-air genocide for most of us to realize this, but now we know the truth, and we cannot unknow this truth. And so here we are. Where we go from here, I would hope, is to resist the normalization of the pathologization of empathy, kindness, and basic decency, which is all we really need to win. It is very, very simple. And every one of us already possesses this. We have the power to center the moral compass around the brutalized and the disposable, from Palestine to factory farming and everything in between. We just have to do it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed how you put it, that the mainstream veganism are using actually veganism and animal rights as more like a branding and marketing. I always feel like, yes, they care for animals, but it is part of another agenda. So it's not like kind of the main agenda. And I'm wondering, over the last year, what has emerged is a new organization called Vegans for Palestine. Waseem, you're actually one of the founders. I'm just wondering, how did this new group come together? Who had the idea? What was the initial spark to actually create this group? And how has it changed over the past 12 months?
Thank you for this question. So, Vegans for Palestine is a collective that really started by a few of us, but mainly a person that is actually Lebanese, because they also understand the connection between Palestine and Lebanon and what can happen. We can see that right now. His name is George, and the idea came from essentially realizing that we all are facing the struggle of noticing the silence within the mainstream vegan community. As Akbar just mentioned, it is just the mainstream vegan community if you look at it, but also how animal rights activists within this movement have been also accustomed to the propaganda that is coming out of the Israeli regime to use veganism as well. We realize that there's people who are either silent, just that silent about it, because they may have certain personal invested interest, but also because they truly think that it is helping the animals by defending Israel because they're leading the way in the movement. And there's a lot of brainwashing there too. So the main reason for it was basically to first encourage others in the vegan movement and animal rights movement to start advocating for Palestine, but also understand the relationship between that and the animal rights movement itself. And then also educating about the deep ties of the vegan washing and how, again, the settler colony of Israel adapts these techniques specifically and, these values, so-called progressive values, for what they view the Western progressive values are, to apply to, as a moral cover for what they're committing, not just of the genocide over the last 12 months, and of course, over the last 76 years as a whole. This has been consistent with their actions in trying to, again, appeal to the world. I believe Laura actually spoke quite a few in one of a podcast episode that I stumbled upon at one point, which enlightened me about the vegan washing on a governmental sanctioned level. So the Vegans for Palestine collective initially started for that reason, to educate about the vegan washing and also getting people to advocate for Palestine and get the connection there. But then also over the last 12 months, we've come to not just educate about that, but hopefully also as we continue to see the developments and the aggression and the intensifying aggression in Gaza and elsewhere around Palestine and beyond, we are trying to keep people up to date on the news in general. And then also keeping in mind the history before October 7th. So there's been multiple initiatives that are slowly growing, which is podcasts that have been launched. One of them is by another founding member of Vegans for Palestine. Her name's Dalal, and she focuses on the Arabic audience side, where we talk about veganism in Palestine within the Arabic community and the involvement there, because there's also a lot of education to happen on both sides of the world. And then there's also recently starting to issue podcasts about the Nakba, which is the initial catastrophe and the beginning of the ethnic cleansing, not the beginning, but the beginning officially of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine from 48. And we're coming out with more episodes to discuss the history there as well, tying it all up from a vegan lens or from the animal rights movement lens. And of course, as we are trying, because we are roughly new, right? Like we started in it specifically from last October. So we're also trying to provide that space for fellow activists, fellow animal rights activists, to amplify their voices about what they're advocating for Palestine and the vegan movement and tying the connection there. Besides all of that, stumbling upon the existing education that has been happening within the vegan movement, specifically about Palestine, again, even before October, but just hasn't gotten that pickup within the mainstream media or mainstream vegan community for various reasons. So we're trying to, again, show how far and how deep this goes within this, as well as be the space for the vegan community or the newly birthed vegan community that can hopefully keep us in community and engaged with the education about Palestine and veganism. That's just to keep it in short, hopefully.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Now, Waseem, you touched on a few really good points, and I really want to cover all of them. But first, you also talked about how Vegans for Palestine, has this podcast. And although it is sad because I don't understand Arabic, but I love the idea. Most of the vegan material out there is in English, and that already makes the movement very westernized. It makes the mainstream veganism kind of white because of that language. You could say it's the language of the Western society. I think it's really great that you're actually trying to change that. It's almost like you're taking your eyes off the West and turning and looking at the Arab-speaking countries. And I think that is really important, because especially when we talk about dehumanization of Black and brown people, especially Arabs and Muslims, that has actually played a huge role in enabling this genocide. And when we keep talking about dehumanization, people forget that it happens through telling a story. Somebody must be really good at marketing and branding. They have been telling a story how Black and brown people and Muslims and Arabs are, how they behave. And I really believe we need a strong counter narrative to challenge those stories that have led to dehumanizations of our people. I'm going to actually ask you first, and then I'll probably ask Akbar as well. But Waseem, in your opinion, how can we actually shift the narrative?
Yes, thank you for that. And I just want to kind of maybe hopefully tie this up with what I mentioned about or what you also brought up with the Arabic podcast. And that's actually to emphasize that has already been existing even within Palestine, because Leila herself, who is the host of the podcast, is actually in Palestine. There's also the group Vegan in Palestine, who is the one that launched the initiative Vegan for Gaza, which you showed earlier on when we started. So these initiatives have also, and the movement itself has been on the ground in the works, not just in Palestine, but across the region for a while now. Like you mentioned also, and like Akbar also mentioned, which is the vegan lens itself has been so westernized, and we're trying to shift away from that by also showing that people of all kinds, and specifically those that have been marginalized, that they not only, not that it's any justification that, if they're not vegan, we can justify whatever we want to do to them, which is a whole other thing with vegan washing, but these things have historical ties to the culture of Arabs, and then also any marginalized people in general and indigenous communities, because there's philosophy of veganism is not just about diet and so on. So we understand all of that comes together from the cultural ties that have been trying to be erased. And when it comes to Islamophobia specifically, and trying to shift the narrative, I don't know, I read your question when you sent it, and I'm trying to understand how we can shift the narrative of people who are racist, just straight out racist and bigots. It's not something that I think is personally like we can tackle or do in that sense, like doing something different to change the narrative, but more so lean into those that have already shown their consciousness throughout the last 12 months, who have maybe that been deconstructing racism in their own way, and that's great, unfortunately at a very, very high price. But those are the people that, after 12 months of silence, or, I'm not going to work on people who have been silent for 12 months. I want people who have been in this movement for a while now and have been working on actually decolonizing their mindset in themselves. And the podcast is one way, but additionally, it's a collective work of all of the existing marginalized communities that are within the vegan community itself, that we just educate about our culture. It's just storytelling, like you said. It's ironically, with the dehumanization is storytelling, but also with humanization, you can think of it as storytelling, because we're just living our lives and we're just sharing it and documenting it. And we see this again, whether through the vegans that we talk to on the ground in Gaza, whether through those that are participating in such initiatives, and people in general from these communities that have been just showing that we exist as vegans, vegan Arabs, vegan Palestinians, vegan Muslims, and so on. And I believe that extends to everywhere else. And I think just not holding ourselves back from just existing within this community is the best way to combat that, and to draw in those that have been already working on deconstructing to start educating their surroundings, because I think it's their responsibility, those that are not within the marginalized community, it's their responsibility that after they deconstruct their mindset, they work on those around them. And that happens at various points within our life, whether at the dinner table or at whatever it may be. There's a lot of work to do from that sense. I would answer that way, I believe.
Thank you. Once again, you touched on so many things. I cannot cover everything, but I liked what you said, that how can we change the mindset of a racist? If they're already racist, can we actually change that? So if the mindset of the mainstream veganism is racist, can we change it? And if we can't, do we actually bother with it? Or do we just say, you know what, this is a game you are playing, we don't want to play this game, we just create our own table, our own rules? But I really feel like, maybe it's time for us to shift our focus, just work with marginalized people, because one issue is that when marginalized people are in the mainstream community, their voices are not heard. They are more bullied and oppressed. I don't know if actually we can change the system from within, or we should just, create our own groups. So anyway, you said a few other things. I'll get back to that, but I want to hear from Akbar. What are your thoughts how we can change the narrative?
Thank you, Leila. All right, so this is a very heavy and kind of broad question. So I wrote up my thoughts. Hope this makes sense. So I understand the purpose of this question, but I'm actually going to reject the framework of humanization and dehumanization for the Palestinians. And I'm going to insist that we only view them, even in the midst of their annihilation, in fully humanized terms. In everything I have seen and heard from the Palestinians, whether it is their willingness to fight for survival, to endure in the abyss of death, slaughter, and starvation, to resist the brutalization of their bodies, to combat the erasure of their history and their identities, to care for one another after 4 generations, after 76 years of an oppressive colonial regime, to open their hearts, hands, and homes to the beyond human Palestinians, the animals of Palestine, to stand steadfast with the flora, the soil, and the olive trees of Palestine. They are fully and resolutely human. They are, frankly, more human than I can ever imagine being. They have shown us for decades that resistance and abolition is in their blood, and even when that blood is spilled, they embody the most superhuman and aspirational of qualities. So standing for Palestine is standing for human rights. It's standing for the liberation of the most marginalized, of the most marginalized, of the most marginalized. It is standing for the full dignity and liberation of beyond humans, of non-human animals, of other animals, of plant and sea life, of all nature. It encapsulates and embodies every liberation struggle in the world, because it has shown us for decades now how colonizer and genocidal logics work, how certain groups and bodies become sites of weaponization and are rendered disposable in the service of those who seek to not only dominate the marginalized, but to dominate all earthlings, nature, and life itself. If we can defeat Zionism, if we can defeat colonialism, then we can reclaim our glorious earthly home from the cruel and crushing grasp of empire. White supremacy and its attendant genocidal logic is above all else about never having to be accountable to anyone for any amount of level of atrocity or violence or evil. It acts simply because it chooses to do so, and it needs no other rationale than that. To which I say the narrative is that we must hold them accountable, that we will account for every single dead Palestinian over the last 76 years, that we will account for every stolen and demolished home, that we will account for every inch of occupied land. The narrative is and must be that Palestinian solidarity is no longer just Palestinian. It is no longer just Arab or Muslim. Palestinian solidarity has now transcended all of that. And as Angela Davis and June Jordan said decades ago, the fight for Palestinian liberation is reflected in all liberation struggles, especially those who are most subjugated by empire. Not just the Palestinians, but the people of Lebanon and Congo and Syria and Iraq and Sudan and Haiti and Hawaii and Puerto Rico and Kashmir and Armenia and Afghanistan and Yemen and Okinawa, and perhaps most especially of all, the beyond human animals with whom we share this planet. Their suffering, like the suffering of the Palestinians, has been invisibilized by being normalized to the point where it is so ubiquitous that it is like oxygen. No one notices, and that is by design. The exploitative, extractive white supremacist empire has told us for centuries that not only is violence against certain bodies justified, it is in fact required for the functioning of the empire. To which I say, such an empire should be destroyed. It must be destroyed, and it will be destroyed, and that I will be an active part of that destruction. Because in the end, the empire is answerable to those it has subjugated the most. It is now answering to the people of Palestine and to all earthlings it has rendered disposable. It is now dissolving under the weight of its own facade of invincibility. This could only end this way, and this was always going to end this way, and we all know it. We are not freeing Palestine. Palestine is freeing us. It is not possible to fight for animal rights while remaining silent on ethnic cleansing and genocide. It is not anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli government. It is not Islamophobic to criticize the Saudi or Iranian governments. It is not possible to own the earth or her children. All settler colonial projects are prisons. This prison system must be defunded, divested from, dismantled, and destroyed for liberation. Animal liberation will require the end to every occupation, the fall of every empire, the dissolution of all oppression, the end of all supremacy. Palestine will be free, Haiti will be free, Darfur will be free, Congo will be free, Myanmar will be free, Armenia will be free, Afghanistan will be free, Kashmir will be free, Lebanon will be free. Black bodies will be free, indigenous people will be free, trans folks will be free, the animals will be free. This is the narrative from every river to every sea will all be free.
Thank you. This was very inspiring and very hopeful. I must admit, although for me, fighting for liberation, collective liberation, that is what I do. But I'm not sure if I'm as hopeful as you are, to be honest. But you said something that marginalized people, Arabs, Muslims, and black and brown bodies and animals have been invisible. That is what has been happening. That's why they have been exploited. It has been easy to exploit them. Let's put it that way, because they are invisible. Their suffering doesn't count because they are invisible. We need to make ourselves visible. We need to find our voices. Actually, Waseem posted something back in November or December, I cannot remember. He shared something that really resonated with me. He said since October 7, he has found his voice and he's unapologetically himself. And that really resonated with me. That gives me hope. Seeing that black and brown people, like people from the global south, they are not finding their voices. They are actually loud. They are on the streets and they are unapologetic about what they support and their beliefs and values. And yes, that does give me hope. And I think that is part of shifting the narrative and making them visible. Going back to what you were saying, we need to make that suffering, but those people and their stories visible. That would definitely help. Thank you. I'm going to actually go back to Laura because we talked a lot about vegan washing and how Israel likes to portray itself as it's the vegan capital of the world and it has the most moral army in the world. Everything about Israel is so fantastic, obviously. And Laura, you are the only Jewish person on this panel. And let's face it, this genocide is happening in your name. And a lot of non-Jewish vegans actually support Israel because they believe that Israel is vegan friendly. I had actually a vegan Facebook friend messaging me and saying, as long as Palestine doesn't commit to veganism, he's not gonna support them. And to be honest, I didn't respond to him. What is the role of Jewish vegans in debunking these myths about Israel being vegan friendly?
Wow, that comment. What other human population in the world has to go vegan to earn or deserve their human rights? Human rights are not conditional. I mean, that would be, in a way, the equivalent of saying, if you're going to look at this through an animal rights paradigm, well, only the species that are herbivores deserve animal rights. Carnivores don't, right? I mean, it's that idea of it being conditional is outrageous and totally, obviously, anti-liberatory. The whole question of this, vegan washing and, we support Israel because it's a quote unquote vegan nation, which is absolutely ridiculous. First of all, Israel is one of the biggest animal consumers and exploiters in the world for such a tiny little quote-unquote nation. They are actually, the biggest dairy exporters in the Middle East. They are one of the biggest animal consumers by far. So, in terms of consumption, they're certainly not vegan. But also, even aside from that, how is it vegan to be attacking and bombing and killing all living beings of all species? That is as non-vegan as it gets. And this idea of a vegan army or a moral army, which of course, and by the way, this vegan washing comes directly from the government propaganda. It actually comes from the Israeli ministry that they are putting out this message of Israel being a quote-unquote vegan nation. So this is not just that people are looking at the population of Israel or the Israeli people themselves. This is actually like very direct propaganda and strategic propaganda to make them look progressive, to make them look humane, to make them look civilized, more civilized than their supposedly savage, barbaric, backwards Arab populations that they're occupying and bombing and invading, etc., both within Palestine and also, of course, in the surrounding countries, including, as we've seen recently, Lebanon. So, this is very deliberate propaganda, and this idea of a vegan army, and not only a vegan army, but a colonial army, an occupying an army of colonizers that is occupying and attacking and slaughtering and genociding the indigenous population of that land. That's just, wow. Like, how could anybody be looking at that and think that there was anything moral about that or vegan about that? It's really outrageous that anyone in the vegan movement, especially at this stage, is still looking at it in those terms. I also feel like part of it is that they are, on some level buying into the myth of, criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic, it's anti-Jewish, and so that might be part of the reason why they don't want to speak out, especially if they are also concerned about, let's say, funding sources from individuals or organizations that maybe are Zionists. So, there's like a lot of, I think, concern about that, which is very misguided. And the more Jewish people themselves speak out against that and make that distinction clear that no, speaking out against Zionism is not anti-Semitism. In fact, if anything, I would argue that pro-Zionism is anti-Semitic for many reasons, but including the fact that Palestinians are Semites, Arabs are Semites. But Jewish people themselves need to make that distinction because, of course, there's still this, this idea of lane politics that has, we have to, some validity, but in this case, it's being exploited. This idea of, only a Jewish person can determine what is anti-Semitic against Jews or what is not. So it really is on Jewish people themselves to speak out and make that distinction clear. No, do not support Zionism or do not silence yourself on speaking out against the atrocities that are being committed against Palestine on our behalf because we ourselves are saying no to this. We don't want this happening in our name, and speaking out against this is not against us. It is in alignment with our solidarity with all oppressed people. But I also will say that I think that on a deeper level, there is also the issue of just a very white-dominated, Western vegan movement that does, on some level, maybe, subconsciously or unconsciously, looks at the Israelis, looks at the Palestinians, and who do they identify with? They identify with the Israelis because they're white, they're colonizers, they're settlers, etc. And they see the white Western culture and way as superior and more civilized, quote unquote. And that's why they buy into the vegan washing propaganda, is because they've already been programmed to believe that, white people are more humane, more civilized, etc., which is, outrageous when you look at it through a clear lens. But when you look at it through that distorted lens, that's who they identify with. They're more culturally similar and they relate to them more. And it is more difficult for them to relate to the Palestinians. And that's why, again, this issue of dehumanization really is so relevant because, at the end of the day, they are looking at the Palestinians as the other. And therefore, they can't relate to them. And it's very easy for them to empathize, literally step into the shoes of and see the perspective of the world through the Israeli eyes than through the Palestinian eyes. That's what I think is really going on with the vegan movement and not speaking out about that. And, as far as Jewish people are concerned, the Jewish diaspora, so, within Israel, you have the Jewish population, and they really are, I'm sorry to say, for the overwhelming majority, very much on board with what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. I wish I could say differently, but it's very, very few and far between Israeli Jews that are opposing this. And the ones that are being severely ostracized and penalized by their communities. And they're very brave to be speaking out against this, but it's really, they don't have the support. These massive protests that we're seeing within Israel, a lot of people are kind of framing them as being, oh, look, all of these people are coming out and they're, protesting against their government, and they want to believe, people in other parts of the world want to believe that this is in solidarity with the Palestinians, but it really isn't. It's about, oh, we want you to prioritize bringing the Israeli hostages home, not we oppose what you are doing to the Palestinians. So, within Israel, that's what's going on. But, the Jews in the diaspora, we also do have a lot of power in this situation to affect things. And one of the ways that I would say is really the most important, that I'm hearing about, especially going on in the US right now, is really military recruitment happening at Jewish schools. And this is something that, is a very, very direct form of Jews in the diaspora directly participating in the genocide of Palestinians. And Jewish people, especially if they are plugged into those sorts of communities where these things are happening, need to speak out against that. If you are in a synagogue, if you are in any kind of Jewish community, you really need to speak out, because there is a lot of Jewish support for this still. And it is very difficult. I mean, I have a friend who is a Jewish anti-Zionist. He's also vegan, and he really tries to live, very much by his ethics. And he comes from a very Zionist family, and he's in a synagogue, and he also was teaching at a Sunday school. And when they found out about his pro-Palestinian activism, he was fired from his Sunday school teaching job. He faced a lot of ostracism from his family and, his community. And he's been holding vigils outside of his synagogue for Palestine. And now the synagogue has actually banned him from participating in the synagogue services. So, it's really difficult to speak out as a Jewish person. If you are plugged into the Jewish community, the harder it is. But at the same time, the more necessary it is. Because, you have a lot of Jewish people like me who are maybe, not in these heavy Jewish Zionist circles who are speaking out. And in some ways, it's much easier for us to do it. But this really has to be happening internally within those Jewish communities. So that's a really important piece of this. But I also have to say, on the note of dehumanization, it's interesting because I also feel like sometimes the dehumanization can go in the way of dehumanizing the oppressor group in some ways, of thinking that they're incapable of changing. This whole sort of approach to it, it's difficult. It's a really difficult line to walk, because on the one hand, you want to have zero tolerance for any Zionism on any level, including the liberal Zionism, the two-state solution Zionism, zero tolerance for that. But at the same time, we don't want to get to the stage where we're just canceling Jewish people, that do, let's say, still buy into the propaganda on some level. Because when we do that, I think, number one, we're not giving them a chance then to have those conversations and to change their minds, even if it's a gradual process. And the other thing is that it's almost like we're encouraging them to kind of own it in a sense. Oh yeah, well, you think that I'm just, Zionist scum anyway, so I may as well just adopt that attitude. And it almost serves then to rationalize, you're not going to change either, and blah, 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 and, you're just my enemy. And I just really feel like that can have a destructive impact in the end. We really want to keep that space open to speak to their better side or their higher values. I believe that you can change. I know that you have something in you that your heart can expand, that you can empathize, and I'm going to keep working on you to try. It's really hard, and there are some people that, they're just going to be completely closed off to that. But even if you can just plant a seed, maybe they'll come back later. Maybe it'll be, months here or later. But something to say, you don't have to be this way. I believe that you have the capacity to change. So, and especially, again, within the Jewish community, that work really needs to be done, because there's going to be a level of trust there, maybe, that there might not be outside of it. There might be a little bit more willingness to listen. Yeah, I think that is really some of the stuff that I would say we kind of need to do moving forward.
Thank you. I agree. And I like actually that you mentioned it, that it has to happen within the Jewish community, because to be honest, I feel like, we cannot ask people who are being oppressed and who have lost loved ones to come and be open-minded and talk to those who have actually facilitated that. We cannot ask them. I know I wouldn't be able to do that. Also, again, for marginalized people, they don't have the same resources as white people. I think we need to agree on that. White people in general have more resources available. Marginalized people don't have the same. And you need to be careful with what you do with the limited resources you have. Where can you have the most impact? And I find that, especially within the mainstream vegan community, sometimes I feel that's a waste of my energy, to be honest. And I think I would feel the same with, talking to a Zionist. That's just a waste of my energy, a waste of my time and, mental energy, emotional energy. I would rather do something else with that time. Yes, it has to happen. I agree. People can change, and we need to leave the line of communication open. That dialogue should happen, but it is on white people, on Jewish people, to talk to other Zionists. And yes, as you said, I'm sure they are more open to listen to a Jewish person rather to a Muslim person. Definitely not. Okay, I'm really mindful of the time, so I'm just gonna ask a few questions. You mentioned that vegan organizations, they are probably silent because of funding. And I know, Akbar, I don't know if you're representing the Apex advocacy, but you are, part of that organization. And Apex advocacy is one of the few organizations, if not the only one, that has been unapologetic and consistent in its support for Palestine. And when I say that Apex has been the only organization, I mean the only organization with a significant presence in the vegan community. I look at other organizations, they're smaller. Apex, as far as I know, has been at every AVA summit, and someone from Apex organization is always invited to speak at major veg fests, in the US. Compared to Apex, the other smaller organizations that have been vocal, they're not as prominent and widely recognized as Apex. So a lot of these people in other organizations, they have silently supported Palestine. They may have donated, and they may even have shared on their personal stories, but the organization itself has been silent. Especially what I find very disappointing is that a lot of vegan Muslim organizations have been silent. So what is different about Apex, apart from having integrity, obviously? What sets you apart?
Thank you so much for that question, Dr. Leila, and thank you for your kind words about Apex. So yes, Apex has been extremely vocal about calling out both the actual genocide in Palestine and also the animal rights movement's collective silence on genocide. And there are a few things that set Apex apart from mainstream organizations, which have, as we said, been almost completely silent. First and foremost, Apex is not a single issue organization. For those who may not know, Apex stands for APEX, Animal Protection, Equality, Intersectionality. It is literally in our name, intersectionality. And we don't mean intersectional in that self-serving way that most vegan advocacy organizations use the term intersectionality, by which I mean they only see the intersections that serve their single issue mission to cater to middle-class white folks in the donor class. We mean the full and foundational intersection of human and beyond human oppression, as theory and as lived practice, both of which inform how we organize and resist oppressive structures. So that's the first reason. Second reason, Apex is a Black-led organization, which works to achieve animal liberation through the lens of Black liberation. And It's important to note that the movement for Black liberation in the United States specifically has always existed in tandem with the support of allies of Palestinian heritage. This is a prime example of intersectional social justice advocacy. Many people are aware that civil rights icons such as Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Angela Davis, Jesse Jackson, etc., and Black intellectuals such as James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, June Jordan, Alice Walker, Maya Angelou all stood in solidarity with the cause of Palestinian liberation throughout their careers. The iconic Assata Shakur of the Black Liberation Army put it best when she said, quote, "Palestine is not just an issue for Palestinians, it is an issue for all of us who believe in justice and human rights. The same forces that oppress Black people in America are those that support the occupation in Palestine," end quote. Lastly, I have to give a lot of credit to Apex's founder and executive director, Chris Sol-Eubanks, who I don't think he's here, but Chris, if you are, big shout out to you. Everyone who knows Chris knows that he is a very calm, very mellow, and frankly, fairly introverted person. But even though he's someone who doesn't crave the spotlight or notoriety that often comes with leading an organization, he's definitely a forged in the fire activist at heart, and he walks the talk of radical, collective, and total liberation. Chris understands that there is no liberation for non-human animals as long as genocide against humans persists. And vice versa, there is no liberation for humans as long as we continue to exploit, brutalize, and kill our beyond human relatives. The two are inextricably linked. And if you look at all the major challenges facing humanity, climate catastrophe, pandemics, and diseases with the highest rates of mortality, even the proliferation of violence across all levels of human society, all of it is rooted in our oppression of beyond human animals. Our liberation is tied to their liberation. One will never happen without the other because they are in fact the same. Now, other orgs have spoken out on behalf of the Palestinians, as you mentioned, and their supporters, including groups like Food Empowerment Project, Veggie Mijas, the Raven Corps, the Institute for Animal Happiness, and numerous sanctuaries. Also people like Miyoko Shinner and Omar Wale, Christopher Sebastian, Stuart Mitchell, and of course, Susan Abu Hawa have all centered the Palestinians in their animal advocacy. I also want to take this moment to express solidarity with the rank and file staffers of the mainstream animal rights groups. I won't name the names, but you know who I'm talking about, who work in settings that externally position themselves as oriented around liberation, but internally have maintained an atmosphere of silencing, doxing, and criminalizing expressions of solidarity with the cause of Palestinian liberation. Dozens and dozens of them from every region of the world have reached out to Apex, and myself especially, since last October, and expressed abject horror at the fact that their employers, again, social justice organizations that tout compassion as their mission, have expressly forbidden discussions about genocide in workspaces and are instead demanding that employees stifle their grief, suffocate their rage and their collective horror, and perform normalcy for the sake of, quote, the organization. This is textbook white supremacy. This is textbook capitalism. This is textbook exploitation. This is textbook compassion fatigue and burnout. Shame on each and every organization which has such a policy in place. Any such organization does not deserve the presence, the talents, the dedication, or the labor of its staff, and any such organization has rendered itself irrelevant to any question of justice and to any notion of animal liberation. So for the sake of the activists, and especially the sake of the animals, I invite everyone in those mainstream spaces to come and look at what we're doing at Apex and other groups like us, to come and see what total liberation is all about and what we're doing. Our door is open, and we hope you will join us.
Thank you. I wonder if more people would speak up. It's not about the people, it is really about those in power who are silencing. I'm really mindful of the time, but I wanted to talk about the bullying and exploitation that is happening within the vegan organizations, and usually people just brush it off as infighting, which is not. There is a lot of internal oppression going on within the vegan mainstream organizations. I'm going to actually move on, just ask one last question. A year of silence by our fellow vegans, vegan groups, organizations, animal rights organizations, and some of these people, I'm not into celebrities, so I'm not talking about myself, but I know a lot of people, they feel betrayed because these organizations and these individuals, vegan individuals, people used to look up to them. And now they feel disappointed, betrayed. And a lot of people say, they are not going to forgive those vegans who have stayed silent. And a lot of people say that silence is a complicity. And I'm not talking about Zionist vegans, by the way. I'm talking really just about those who have silently supported Palestine by donating, or who haven't uttered a single word. So some of those people, I look at them, I'm like, I don't even know where you stand, because you have carried on as if everything is business as normal. And I'm really wondering, how can we move forward? Should we collaborate with those organizations and individuals who have been silent? The vegan community is small. We are really a small community. And in order to advance, we need to collaborate and work together. But how do we do that? And that is, for me as a nutritionist, that is a big question, because all the organizations that focus on whole food plant-based diet, they have been silent, all of them. How am I supposed to work in this community as a plant-based nutritionist? Waseem, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is one of probably the most, let's just say, unrealistic questions to be asked, because to me, it's like, how do you forgive a genocide, or the silence of the genocide? I get that you're talking about those that are silent, maybe even supporting in private, but we know that silence is not just, like, we don't just say silence is complicity as just a phrase, but it's literally silence is complicity. Like, we know this, and we've seen this not just, again, from the genocide that's happening in Gaza, but also we see this through everyday oppression that's happening all around the world, even in the West, where people sometimes walk down the street, see some people getting some sort of state-sanctioned violence and oppression, they just walk by. And that happens. So how do you forgive oppression in general as a vegan, right? Because if you want to be a vegan and follow your values, you have to work towards the values that you actually stand for. And in my opinion, I would like to shift it a little bit differently and say, I understand that we're a smaller community where collaboration is bound to happen. And somehow, because of how veganism and animal rights movement itself has been so co-opted into Zionism and into the settler colony of Israel, it's just important to think of it as strategically tackling this issue from a BDS point of view. And I hope I'm going to be able to make this point, referencing the BDS, because it's important for us to understand that we want, like, in my opinion, again, how do you forgive tens of thousands, really hundreds of thousands of people getting killed right now, and you're still silent about it? So for me, it's like similar to BDS, where there's targeted campaigns launched against those that are mostly complicit, or those that could potentially cause a material impact on the ground if they were to be divesting from said companies or so on. And one thing that I remember coming across from the BDS movement is saying that, yes, ideally everybody that is associated with the settler colony is in a way complicit, but by doing this targeted campaign and getting effect out of it, like material effect, whether the economy comes down because of that withdrawal of investments and so on, that also sends a strong message to those within that industry that you don't change what you're doing or your policies, or you don't start standing up for the values that you're standing up for, which contradict the current oppression that's happening, then you might be next. You might be on the target next. And I can't think of a specific nutritionist company that is like plant-based that could potentially have been silent or even associated. But similarly to that, if we as a vegan movement come together to actually successfully accomplish a vegan-led targeted campaign from a BDS point of view, then that will trickle down and send a message to the rest of those communities, companies that are within the vegan community that we might be collaborating with. And then on a broader level is that I want to emphasize basically what we've been kind of talking about since the beginning of this call, and it's really, we're working towards building a new vegan movement, right? And it's, as it's been mentioned, it's being birthed right now, and the mainstream vegan movement, it's not standing for the values and the rights of what we believe in. And in order for us to build that, it's not going to be overnight, but it will be throughout time. And we need to start building it by working together to actually create that space where there is a whole food plant-based nutritionist company that not just like is silent about world issues and world oppressions, but also advocates for it and like works towards representing those values in order for us to start supporting each other economically, materially, being like in solidarity for all oppressive movements and connecting that real intersectional. I've become to hate this word after all of the misunderstanding about it within the last 12 months, but really understanding the intersection between those movements and wanting to build, let's say, the new industry of the vegan products free from total oppression. Really, it's still like total liberation and collective liberation for all, and we want to build that, but to build it, it's going to take time. And in order for us to get there, I think it's most important to start thinking, how can we change? Again, I want to emphasize, we're talking about those that may have been silent, but also kind of contributing to like helping the Palestinian cause, maybe privately, but anybody that has been complicit or is taking funding from or is financially supporting such like the regime itself, whether again from food, from financial donations, those I no more ties with them. It just does not make any sense. And I just hope that this is waking up the overall animal rights movement to again change that narrative in their own mind about what really veganism means and how you want to build this future. You know, everybody dreams about a vegan world, but what does that mean? And if you want that, you need to work with companies and collaborate with those that are like-minded working towards that goal. That's how I would take it.
Thank you. It's interesting. I was just reminded a lot of these plant-based organizations that focus on nutrition, they actually understand that they need to speak up for human rights, because when Ukraine was attacked, I know a lot of them organized donations and sent money. And I know, I'm in the UK, there was this organization and some of the members actually rented a van and they got food and everything. They actually drove all the way to help those Ukrainians, flee to Poland. So they understand it. They do understand it. It's just when it comes to Palestinians, to, Muslims and Arabs, that they are silent. You're right. We need to, challenge that. But one of the challenges is that a lot of these ordinary vegans, everyday vegans, they may talk about, supporting Palestine. But then when you ask them, actually, can you maybe not, promote this product because it has actually Zionist ties? Or can you actually unfollow this influencer who has been silent? Then that's when they come and say, yes, but animals, how do we get those vegans who are, as I said, pro-Palestine? They go to, protest marches, they wear their kafiyas and everything, but then they don't make that connection. I don't really understand it. I don't get it. And I think, yes, there's a lot of work we have to do, and it won't happen overnight. Thank you. I had more questions, to be honest, but I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to just wrap it up. I have one question for all the panelists. I want to finish it on a positive note, or on something that each of us can actually, an action that each of us can take. Now, Israel has been bombing, Gaza for the last 12 months. Now it has started an attack on Lebanon. And to be honest, I don't feel like there is an end in sight. So what is one impactful action that each of us can take? And I'm not talking about just speaking out for Palestine. We are already doing that. Do you want Anas to go first?
Yeah, we haven't heard from Anas for a while, so
yes.
I would absolutely appreciate hearing from him.
What we can do for Gaza? This is the question. I think the protest is good things to let the governments know about that. People are waking up and now they know the truth. And they know that where is the right side. People are know now that Israel like a cancer for everyone, not just for governments. It is the cancer for everyone stay in this life. And Israel government should let people to go to life. They should let them to have a good life. And since many years, we have some Jewish live in Gaza and West Bank. And we not have any problem with them because the really Jewish believe that this land for Palestinian. But when the permission from Belford and about the Nakba, we find some countries said Israel. The UK give to Israel people the thing that they not should have. This land for Palestinian and make a pressure for governments to stop this war. And I seen that in Germany and in USA and UK, people, when they are going to protest and close the shops, the street, everything, may make a problem for their governments, because the economical will destroy in these governments if they not stop this war. The war in Gaza, not a problem just for Israel. It is a problem for all countries, because if this war not end, that means the governments will end. And I think after this war, many governments will end. The first governments will be Israel. After that, we will see many things change in this world. If I need to talk about what people should doing for Gaza, like I said, we are now creating a funds for raising money to help people in Gaza, to help families in Gaza, to help everyone in Gaza. Through money, we are able to make this situation better for some people. But to be honest, again, a protest. And if we always talk about Palestine and share the stories about what happened here, that really will make something different for us. I just need to talk about something that some people believe that Israel is a friend for animals. To be honest, everyone go to YouTube and see what Israel army did for horse. They killed it many times, not in one gun. They killed it, and they destroy.
Okay, I think his connection is not. Anas, we lost you a little bit at the end, but thank you so much. I actually shared the link to PayPal, the fundraising that Laura is doing. I will share it again when I send out the recording, and hopefully we can raise more funds. Thank you. So yeah, let's go to Laura. What is your one impactful action that each of us can take?
So I was having a hard time choosing between several actions that I feel like need to happen. So I hope it's okay. I want to mention a couple of different things. First of all, I feel like a really important thing here is to platform Palestinians themselves and to talk to Palestinians themselves, because I feel like that really, number one, has a lot to do with why the dehumanization has been allowed to continue, is because they are just silenced and, spoken over all the time. So, talking to them, listening to them, I really feel like the fact that social media has given us the opportunity to do that in a way that we were never able to do that before is actually what has played a major role in why there has been so much more support for Palestine and organizing and activism for Palestine, and even also with other movements like Black Lives Matter, for example, is because of that. So that's a really important piece. A second one I wanted to mention is really still emphasizing, helping people to understand exactly what the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is all about, because I feel like there's still a lot of misunderstanding about that. Number one, in terms of, boycotting certain products, goods, etc., specifically within the vegan movement, as well as outside of it, vegan products, and also vegan figureheads, speakers, why it's important for them to not go to Israel, because this is an organized boycott to put pressure on Israel. And I think the fact that Israel is acting, and the Zionist whole cartel, we'll say, is reacting so violently to these protests is because of the fact that they're feeling threatened by it. So it's really important to keep that pressure on them. And specifically also, to help people understand that these protests on the college campuses, they're not just protesting, the overall situation, although certainly that as well, of Israel committing genocide against Palestine, but specifically that their universities are investing, that they've invested money in Israel, in some cases even weapons manufacturers and contractors and etc., and that they're pressuring their universities to pull that money out. And again, of course, the U.S. taxes, billions of dollars going to Israel. So, really kind of educating yourself and then working to educate others on what that movement is all about, and that strategy to put economic pressure to get out of Palestine. The third thing I was going to say is that I also feel like just within the vegan movement that, a lot of these organizations, they're operating under the assumption still that their followers either don't care about this issue or that they are even, pro-Zionist. So it is really important for us to make it known to these organizations, hey, if you don't take a stand on this issue, you are going to lose masses of followers. You are not in alignment with the dominant sentiment in our movement anymore. So if your concern is, I mean, of course, we don't want them to just be, kind of like making these sort of empty gestures, to show Palestine solidarity that, and it's just for image. But at the same time, when they do that, that is showing that the trend is moving in the direction of supporting Palestine. So, there is a bellwether aspect to that. So, they need to know that if they're silent, they are going to lose supporters and they're not in alignment with the dominant position in this movement anymore.
Thank you. I agree. It shouldn't be performative as they did with BLM. And there are some, organizations who have put out like kind of ceasefire now, and that was it. Just a one post about ceasefire now. I think that is a little bit too little. Yeah. A little bit more than that. Thank you. Akbar, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just keep mine short. Thank you so much, Laura, for all those important points. Those are really, really great things that we can all do, which I think are like reachable in the short term. I'll kind of say two things that are kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum. One, I think this doesn't get said enough, but I think those of us who are activists who are trying to like build a better liberated world for all beings, it's really hard sometimes to think, how are we going to do this when everything is so universally horrible, right? And we're overwhelmed by the weight of the challenges, the like entrenched system of empire and brutalization and exploitation that we're all a part of, by choice or by not. So what I have personally found to be helpful is at some point during the day, engage in utopia building. Like sit with yourself and just think about like, what world do I want to create? What world, even like if it's like super far out in, the future or it seems impossible, whatever it is, engage with that and try to see like how your activism or your just general life can fit into that, how it can help that manifest. I'll just say, as somebody who grew up around, quite a few Palestinians, and I saw the whole fight for liberation my whole life. I saw, despite all of the like protests and the efforts and the BDS and all this, the situation just got worse and worse over time. And I would be like, what's the point of fighting this? It's never going to change. The Zionist logic is so firmly embedded into, Western morality. It's pointless. Palestinians just don't count, right? And so for a long time, I would just, kind of shrug it, like it's pointless. Like let's not engage. Like it's a lost cause, right? But what that was it was actually like a seed of oppression that had been planted in me to be quote pragmatic or to just submit to the state, right? I'm going to encourage everybody to find that seed if it's in you and throw it out. Dig it up and throw it out. Like it doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve liberation. It doesn't serve anybody, especially the most marginalized. The other thing I will say, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, is those of us who are like settlers in like the Western world, especially in the United States, which is funding this whole genocide, myself included, we, I think, do have to accept at some level that for us to meaningfully fight the annihilation of the Palestinians and the Lebanese and whoever else is next, we are going to have to annihilate at some level ourselves. We're going to have to be okay with giving up our comforts, giving up our convenience, giving up our power, giving up our privilege, giving up all the things that make our lives, quote, better, because all of it is built on this foundation of extreme exploitation and oppression and genocide. So to give like an example for like of my own life, I'm in law school here in Denver. I was involved with the encampment here. I was involved with the divestment talks. And during the divestment talks, I went to the chancellor who gave me this long spiel about like how he can't disclose all of the investments that the university has in like Lockheed Martin and all these weapon manufacturers, as Laura mentioned. They're like actively invested in producing weapons to go kill Palestinians to turn them into bags of flesh, right? And so he was giving this long spiel about like how it's so complicated, whatever, right? And so I was like, okay, that's nice, thanks. But what you're saying, I said, is just tone-deaf white supremacy. That's all I'm hearing from you. And he could have suspended me. He could have expelled me. He could have kept me out of law school. I'm a year and a half in. I have all this debt now. But like I was okay with that. Like I can live with being expelled from law school. I cannot live with being silent about genocide. That's okay. Like it's going to involve some level of sacrifice like that, and it's going to be scary. It's not easy. It sucks. It's horrible and shitty. I get it, but we have to do it. They're not going to care. They literally tell us every moment of every day they don't care. And so we have to tell them we have the power and you have no power over us. You don't. You think you do, but you don't. And I'm going to reclaim that, and I'm going to offer myself up as, quote, sacrifice to end this horrific genocide. Anyway, those are two things I would say: engage in some form of self-annihilation and also engage in utopia building. Those things, even though they seem so polarized, I think are things that we have to engage with to be able to meaningfully change. Thank you.
Thank you. What you said about utopia is about imagination and reimagining a new world. I don't know who said that. Somebody said that actually, if we Black and brown people want to change the oppression and move towards liberation, we need to reimagine a new world. So that is really important. And I like, again, the idea of sacrifice. Not necessarily, it's just, I think it is the antithesis of like capitalism, because capitalism is about comfort. We need to have our comfort, safety, and sacrifice is actually giving up that comfort. Thank you for that. Really great. Waseem, your last. Go on.
I mean, what can I add after all of this? This was all very helpful and important feedback and insight. Personally, I was going to say, and I know you said like beyond speaking out, but I think that part of waking up every day to these atrocities day after day for a whole year, we've gotten accustomed to just sharing the news and like being so involved and being so up close to that. But I think it's more important to also make the connections and continue making the connections and not forgetting about that. Because in my opinion, I think that the way the colonizers work, and specifically when it's broadcasted and like live streamed in this way, is to overwhelm everybody to the point where they might think that there's too much happening around the world, whether again it's a genocide or any other type of crisis as they frame it in the world, to just like overwhelm us. And again, it goes back to making us more in an individualistic point of view and worrying about our own causes and our own things that are affecting us in our own cities. But making that connection between what's happening in Palestine, what's happening even here in Turtle Island, and the oppression, and how even NYPD and COP cities are built through the oppression of Palestinians, and they get their training from the IOF there and apply it on Black and brown people here in Turtle Island. It's just important to continue on always making the connection of that. And I know it seems crazy to think, but like the amount of times that I heard over the last 12 months that everything is connected, I cannot agree more. And just emphasizing on that throughout, speaking out about Palestine and the genocide and that's starting to happen right now in Lebanon and beyond, is just very important. And of course, as vegans, I think tying in that within the animal rights movement is even more important, specifically when that is being used as sort of a justification or a way to whitewash and vegan wash the crimes that are happening, forcing us in a way to be like, well, if you really want to fight for the animals, then you got to be silent about this and that, So making that connection and keeping in mind that not only do we speak out about that, but as every other panelist that has mentioned here is taking actions towards whether it's reimagining the new world or contributing to initiatives on the ground by people who are being oppressed and subjugated at this point. Like, again, it's important to make sure that the actions that we're taking right now are beyond speaking out, is also supporting, not just amplifying the Palestinian voices, but contributing to those initiatives on the ground that are working on it. I know sometimes, and we've mentioned this throughout this discussion, that I think Anas mentioned it with organizations that are giving out this aid, right? Like, yes, sure, many of these global organizations have been a lifeline of survival for Palestinians, but we don't want that. We don't want to live upon survival. We don't want to live upon reliance on the world for helping us and sending us aid. We're not like it. Yes, it's a cause for humanity, but Palestine is not a humanitarian cause, right? So we want to understand that we want the people to drive themselves and build themselves, and we need to be at least willing to provide what we can in however way we can, financially, even sometimes like being there with ideas and talking to people on the ground of what we can do to implement this to help rebuild it is crucial. So yeah, I can talk more and more about that, but I think everybody else has covered actions that we should be taking also to stop the oppression as well as build the new world. So I want to thank the panelists that also mentioned this very important points and insights.
Thank you. You said something which resonated with me at the moment. So it's like kind of all these bad news that we are hearing, it is designed to overwhelm us because they want us actually to feel despair. And although I know I'm a bit hopeless, don't come across as having a lot of hope for future, but I think there's a difference between being hopeless and feeling despair, because no matter what, even like myself, I don't really feel hopeful. I still take action. I think we still need to, it is part of resistance, just we need to keep taking these actions. All of you have shared so many interesting ideas. As I said, we could have actually spoken just about those actions, and maybe we do that in future. We'll see. I really want to thank everybody who joined us, and especially the panelists. It was really amazing talking to you all. I hope that those who joined us, they could, take something from this talk, and that, it helps us to move forward in a positive, more efficient way towards liberation. Thank you. Bye-bye.